WVOX.
Yes, it's a strange thing indeed, this world we find ourselves in. It's a strange thing indeed. All together now, come on now, Jersey!
And I'm proud about it. I love the gardens there.
It gets really great! Oh, New Jersey. Oh, New Jersey. It's a funny thing, though. You talk about myths and urban legends. New Jersey, New Jersey's full of them. You ever heard of the Jersey Devil? It ain't just a hockey team, friend. The Jersey Devil is a real thing. The Jersey Devil haunts and stalks the land, stealing wolves out of the forests, stealing goats and chickens. It rips their heads off and leaves the body to rot. It's the Jersey Devil. And of course, a place like New Jersey is going to is going to come up with these myths. But I'm talking about these myths, you see. Now, I want you to tie this all together now. This has to do with about the idea of being easily duped. But these myths that we grew up with as kids, you remember them, of course. Yeah, you remember, like, for example, here's a real easy one. If you say Hail Mary, for example, and you spin around in the bathroom with a candle lit or something along those lines, and something's going to appear in your mirror. You ever heard that? I mean, I tell it's, you know, I don't tell it very scarily, but when a kid comes up to you and you're 14, let's say you're 9, and a 14-year-old kid comes up to you and says, "Oh, you better be careful, because I tell you, I did it once. I spun around and there was the face. There she was, staring back at me. I screamed and then she was gone." You know, you're liable to believe these sorts of things. Well, I want to tell you about a myth that began to circulate in the halls of us video game players as kids. You see, it's amazing the things that cultures take on and create as myths. It's amazing the things that they latch onto, and of course they latch onto the things that really are happening in the culture to turn it into a myth. They latch onto the things. They latch onto the people, to the things that the people are involved with. When it comes to these things. And I remember one, of course, when I went to Pennington Grimes, of course, so over there in Mount Vernon here in Westchester, and there was this spot in the back there where there was this greenhouse, and we used to go play in the parking lot at this school. It was a fabulous time, you know, a very, very high maintenance situation there, very, very expensive and nice. We play in the parking lot, big concrete parking lot, and they wouldn't let us go up onto this big, beautiful hill, a fantastic, lovely, gorgeous hill of grass and dandelions, and then in the springtime, the birds would be singing. It was lovely, and they wouldn't let us go up onto it. But after school, you know, me and my friends would go along, we'd go up to that hill, and we'd go playing around in the back there, and there was always just very odd things scattered around the ground around this greenhouse. Very odd things. You'd see a sock, for example, or a pair of shorts, or a t-shirt, or just little things like that, or somebody's notebook from class, a piece of paper crumpled up, a pencil bag, or a backpack even. You just see these things scattered around in this greenhouse, and it gave a very eerie feeling. And of course, among the kids, there began to circulate this myth, this rumor, this legend. The myth that it was an evil cabal of people who lived in the greenhouse, and every now and then, when a kid was walking home alone after school and it was dark, they would just get snatched out of the ground. There were these tall vines all around the greenhouse, these overgrowth vines. They would stick up as kids. They'd stick well over your head, and you'd imagine you'd be walking along, and all of a sudden an arm would reach out and grab you. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Well, I want to tell you about a particular myth that began to circulate around the video game playing world. This was in the 90s and the 2000s when I was really coming of age. This was just after the real heyday of the arcades. You remember the arcades. The kids would go and you'd stick your quarters in and you'd play these games. And if you were good, you would win and you'd keep on winning and you'd get more quarters and you could play all day, really. And back when I was a kid, these things, they were kind of on their way out. They were on their way out, but they were still a force in the culture. They were still a force in the culture. So I must ask you, have you ever heard of the Legend of Polybus? The legend of the game Polybus. This legend circulated among children, my generation, among game players, because we all became addicted to these games. We would want to play them. We'd play our Nintendo 64s day in and day out if we could. The rumor circulated that in the suburbs of the western city of Portland, Oregon, in 1981, a brand new game was introduced to a small arcade out of town. A brand new game. It was extremely popular the moment it was put down. Kids would line up to play this thing. They would play it for hours and hours and hours. There was lines formed to play this thing that would go around the block. This game was truly addictive. One day, all these kids were lining up to play this thing. They noticed that in the beginning of the evenings, before the arcade really kicked off after school, that men wearing black suits and skinny ties would come into the arcade. The only machine that they would ever go and do anything with, the only machine they would come and deal with, was the Polybus machine. They would come up to this thing and they would stick in their fancy newfangled computers and they would run all kinds of tests and experiments, these men in black suits. And if any kids came over to say, hey, what you doing over there? They'd hush them away. No, kid, don't worry about this kid. Go and play Mario over there. Go and play Pac-Man over there. Yes, Donkey Kong, that's right. We're fixing it. Don't worry, we're just fixing the machine here. We're just fixing it. And as the sun would set, the game would be switched on, and the kids would come in from all around, and they'd line up to play this thing. After a few weeks of this game being in there and being absolutely addictive, absolutely addictive. All the other games, there were hardly any kids playing the other games. They were all lined up, circled around Polybus. There began to circulate reports that the kids who were the best at it were feeling psychoactive effects. Kids would suffer from a series of side effects, including amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, and hallucinations. The company that produced this game had a strange name. A strange name in a foreign language, like a German name or something along those lines. Kids would still line up to play this game, though. They would come from all around, even after reports of kids going crazy. Nah, that's ridiculous. You can't go crazy from playing a game. And they'd come and they'd come and they'd come and they'd line up for blocks around and play and play and play. And all the while, hallucinations kept getting them. They'd walk home and see things in the shadows. They'd try to go to sleep and they couldn't fall asleep. The game was in their vision. The game was in their closed eyes. It was everywhere. And every morning, men in black suits would show up and Polybus has never fully been totally redacted, never been fully proven. The origins of the box, of course, many fakes were made ever since. The legend dates back to 1981. Nobody has been able to conclusively prove that such a thing existed or that such a thing never existed. Kids who played the game in the 80s, who are now adults, report saying that yes, they did play the game, and they did see the men in black suits. And they were there, fiddling with the machine beforehand. And they were there. They saw it. And they had the hallucinations. And when they closed their eyes, all they could see was the game. This addictive game that had kids lining up for blocks around to play. Now, do you believe something like that when I tell you with that creepy music? Now, do you believe that when I tell you that story, that Polybus was a real thing, a real game that showed up in the 1980s that caused hallucinations, that was run by the CIA? Now, really, do you really believe it? Oh, come on, be honest with me now. Be honest. You got a little twinge of feeling in the back of your mind. A little twinge. Of course, that's a bunch of nonsense. Yeah, I can't be that with a game. Of course, everyone in my generation, all my kids, we remember when you get that new video game on that Nintendo, you start playing it, those things, they get stuck in your mind. They start to appear in there. You start to think about it, man. You start to see them. It's believable. It's believable, I tell ya. You see how easily these myths can spread. You see, it just takes a bit of a prod there. Just a bit of a prod and a bit of a push to get things going in the right direction, and all of a sudden you're buying into things that you never would have bought into. You're buying into a great big conspiracy, a government cabal of people who are out there to snatch kids, who are out there to do things, and they're all working for they're working deep inside the government. That's right. Yes, and they're putting these games all over the place. That's right. Yeah, only you have figured it out because you found the website. You found the guy who's letting all the secrets out. That he's telling you. He's guiding everybody on how to do this thing. Yes, you figured it out, friends. You figured it out. Yes, it's very simple. All you need to do is trust the plan. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Get the Polybus game. That's the one. Yeah, no problems there. It's not nonsense. It's not nonsense. It makes total sense to me. I believe it. I believe it. Yeah, this is the Millennial Broadcaster, and we'll be back next week. Keep your knees loose and keep your eye on the ball, for crying out loud. Keep your eye on the ball. For crying out loud, the only way you're going to hit that pitch is if you keep your eye on the ball.